Hello students, Assalamu alaikum. Me Murshida Mahbuba, Senior Lecturer, Biology Department, Milestone College. Welcome you all to our online biology class. From Biology First Paper, Chapter 10, Plant Reproduction, our today's topic is what is fertilization, mechanism of fertilization, and double fertilization. Definition of fertilization: the union of male gamete with the female gamete is known as fertilization. Fertilization is a complex and continuous process. Fertilization in flowering plants was discovered by Strasburger in 1884. Mechanism of fertilization in plant. At first, we have to know the flower pairs. Thalamus or receptacle provide the attachment place of the different floral whorls. Sepals are the outermost whorl. They protect the flower during the bud stage. Petals are generally brightly colored to attract insects for pollination. Anther and filament make the male reproductive part of the flower known as stamen. Stigma, style and ovary make the female reproductive part called the pistil. In the ovary there are ovules. In an ovule have an embryo sac, and in the embryo sac have an egg. During pollination, the pollen grain comes to the stigma. The pollen grain has two layers. The outer layer is called exine and the inner layer is called intine. At some places, exine is thin. These areas are known as germ pores, through which the pollen grains comes out. Pollen grain has two nucleus. The smaller nucleus is called generative nucleus and the larger nucleus is called tube nucleus. Generally, this binucleated condition, pollination, takes place. Generative cell, which will divide to form two male gametes, the tube nucleus makes the pollen tube. The pollen tube gradually grows down through the style and enters into the embryo sac of the ovule through the microbyle. If the pollen tube enters into the embryo sac through the micropyle, then this process is called porogamy. And if the pollen tube enters into the embryo sac through chalaza, then this process is called chalazogamy. And if the pollen tube enters into the embryo sac through integument, then this process is called mesogamy. The embryo sac has three cells towards chalaza. These cells are known as antipodals. There are two nuclei in the middle called the polar nuclei. Three cells are towards the micropyle. The middle larger cell is known as egg and the small cells are called the synergids. The egg and the two synergids would form the egg apparatus. The pollen tube penetrates the embryo sac between the egg and the synergid. The tip of the pollen tube brushes to liberate the two gametes near the egg cell. The first gamete fuses with the egg to form diploid zygote. This process is called fertilization. The second male gamete fuses with the two polar nuclei to form endosperm nucleus. The fusion of three nuclei is called triple fusion. The process of fertilization and triple fusion together is called double fertilization. Okay, we want to review it again. Description of fertilization process. The pollen grain germinates after the carpel is pollinated. The pollen grain enlarges by absorbing moisture from the anther. It ruptures and in time grows through the germ pore into a tube called pollen tube. The pollen tube gradually grows down through the style and enters into the embryo sac through the micropyle. In some plants, pollen tube enters to the egg through chalaza. By this time, the generative nucleus divides into two male gametes by mitosis cell division. Then the apex of pollen tube ruptures, releasing male gamete to the embryo sac. One of the male gamete fertilized with the egg is known as fertilization. The other male gamete fuses with the secondary nuclei. This type of fusion is called triple fusion. Fusion of male gamete with the egg is called fertilization, and at the same time the fusion of other male gamete with secondary nucleus is known as double fertilization. Okay, difference between fertilization and double fertilization. Union of male gamete with female gamete is fertilization, and one male gamete fuses with female gamete to form zygote, and at the same time another male gamete fuses with secondary nucleus is called double fertilization. Through this process zygote is developed, and through this process endosperm is developed. It occurs in all angiosperms and gymnosperms. It occurs only in all angiosperms. It doesn't occur in gymnosperm. Okay, your homework: definition of fertilization, triple fusion, double fertilization, synergids, syngamy, antipodal cell, egg apparatus, and one difference between fertilization and double fertilization. Number 3, draw a labeled diagram of fertilization process, and number 4, describe the fertilization process. Thank you to stay with us. I hope you all submit your homework properly. Thank you.